Welcome to the Nonprofit Digital Success Podcast. I'm your host, David, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about niching your nonprofit and mental health with Jason Hopcus. Jason is a catalyst for a powerful cultural shift because everyone, directly or indirectly, is affected by mental health. He believes that connection to oneself, one's transparency, and one's passion to connect allows individuals to live a wholly, authentic, and full life. He creates systems of people working to deepen their relationship to their work, their play, and ultimately our world. He presently serves as the nonprofit president and CEO of NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness of Arapahoe, Douglas counties, and is the founder of the Connection Project, which is a for-profit company. Jason, thank you so much for joining today on the podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here, David. Thank you for having me.
So I see you're sitting in a spot here and you've got this awesome painting back there beside you. You had mentioned that you're an artist. Tell us something about that painting there. What inspired that?
You know, I don't know exactly. I think it was actually a painting that I had done previously that was screwed up and I didn't love it. So I just went back and added some more layers to it. And we've created this, this kind of chaotic, colorful painting here.
It kind of looks like maybe some kind of landscape, burnt out fire bush, something. I don't know. It's interesting.
I think all of the elements are represented. I don't have any real symbolism to tell you about it. I could go into something deep and philosophical, but I would be making it up.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
It has no meaning.
Awesome. Well, good work with that. It's always great to have, a creative outlet to relieve stress, to, have a hobby or, professionally, if you're an artist on that side. And there's a lot of talk in terms of using art for mental health and for being able to connect with that side of one's brain and personality. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I absolutely think, just to find that place of balance for any of us, I think it's important for us to figure out something that connects us deeper to ourselves. And that can be through some sort of expressive form, like creating art. I also like to garden, getting out, being among nature, reading, spending time with people that you love, something that really just kind of renews your spirit and fills your cup, I think is so important in the chaotic world that we live in today.
Absolutely. So speaking of mental health,
Sure.
so great little segue there. How are you working with people to help them change how they understand mental health?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my work, to give you a little bit of backstory, my work began more than a decade ago after I had my own personal struggle with mental health and really recognized from that experience and the challenges that I had with finding support in some of the darkest times of my life, it's just too hard. And that really sort of set the stage and the foundation as I continued to show up to support myself, to recognize that this perhaps was my life work, to be able to help others, and recognizing that when we're struggling, when things are challenging, when we have transitions in life, it should be easier for us to find a way to support ourselves. So my work is really built upon the back of my own experience and recognizing that it was just too dang hard, and helping create systems of support that really align to better get people connected when they're struggling.
That's really cool. It's really interesting how people's life experiences affect them and change and alter the path that they decide to go down.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah, that definitely was the case for me. I mean, prior to the work that I've done the better part of the last decade, I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, worked in heavy highway road construction, worked in real estate, really more kind of the building and construction side of things. And, when the things that happened to me happened and it sort of brought me to my knees, it really made me reevaluate and understand that often we pursue things in life because we think they're going to make us rich, or they're going to fill our cup, or they're going to do all of these things that we perceive that they may do, and they may ultimately do that. But what I have learned is just because you are good at something does not mean you have to do it. And that understanding really sort of underscores kind of the path that I forged instead of all the things that were known and comfortable to me.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, right? Like, just because you're doing something a certain way doesn't mean you have to always do it that way. You need to kind of open your mind sometimes to change, right? Change isn't always bad, right? And if you can affect the change, if you can be that cause that makes your life easier. Let's say at your work, you're using a piece of software, but there's something new that you want to try that, everybody's talking about. And if that makes your life a little bit easier, if that will help not just you, but your cause, the people that you're working with, your colleagues, your volunteers, your donors, right? Like switching to a different CRM platform for
Right.
managing your donors, right? A lot of people are set in their ways, and it does take time and effort to switch, but maybe the grass is greener on the other side. You don't really know until you've like gone and you've tested the
And
waters.
sometimes it's not.
Sometimes it's not. Absolutely.
Yeah, what I've really learned in being involved in nonprofit work for again about the last 10 years, and recognizing, what I brought to the table was very different than what I saw in a lot of other nonprofits. I mean, I have this entrepreneurial spirit. I've always been a self-employed business owner and kind of forged my own path. And what I recognize in working with other nonprofits, and it's not a criticism of how anybody does things, it just was not a fit for me. The thing that I recognize by and large that I think plagues a lot of nonprofits is this outward facing, we want to collaborate, we want to work with other groups. But when it comes down to actually seeking out the money in the community, everybody wants to fight over the sand in the sandbox. And I'm just not that guy. So for me, it really was an opportunity to sort of pivot and take a 50,000 foot view and look more broadly around how do we sustain this organization that is a business, really from the perspective of getting community partners engaged, getting corporate partners engaged, getting people who could have passion and stand behind the work that we do. I think one of the things that has consistently made me different, and I see myself saying this over and over in meetings, is I always approach what we're working on from a value forward place. And when I say value forward, I mean, let's put ourselves in our intended audience's shoes, the users of the product we're bringing to marketplace, and let's imagine what they need from that perspective. I think so many times, and it's not just nonprofits, it's businesses get caught up in, we want to tell you about how great our widget is, that we forget, there's a real world application for that widget. And if we can really put ourselves in the shoes of the user, it makes a huge difference in their being able to connect with your product, your service, whatever it is that you're wanting to offer. And I see that being the thing that gets missed so often in conversations is we're not discussing how are we providing value forward to the person that's going to use this.
100%. I think there's two things I made a note of as you were talking. One, and anybody listening who has heard other episodes, I often mention that you need to run your organization, your nonprofit, your charity as if it was a business, right? And you mentioned that everybody listening, we didn't talk about this before. Totally organic. You need money to make money. You need to operate. Not everybody. A lot of people, I think, start their nonprofits from a really great, kind, wholehearted place, but they're not thinking about, all right, well, if we want to have a place for children with disabilities to come and be, well, you need money for the facility, right? You need to raise the money, the capital to do the things that you want to do. And they really need to be thinking from that side.
Absolutely.
The other part is value forward, putting yourself in your audience's shoes, in the people you want to connect with, thinking about things from their perspective. And the one thing I would implore everybody listening to this to do is to look at your website, for example, right? Take a look at whatever you've got right at the top of your homepage and ask yourself, so what? What is the benefit of this? And ask yourself, so what? So what? Do it 2, 3, 4 times until you get to what is the actual real value here for the person you're trying to connect with. Instead of saying, we help feed 1,000 children a month, think about it from their perspective. What would engage a donor into that? And instead of saying we help feed 1,000 children a month, it could be you can help feed 1,000 children a month, and changing it from a we to a you, and how you can get involved them instantly creates this emotional connection that is going to get people to go, yeah, I can do this. I can help, right? Like what's $2 a day or whatever the pledge happens to be. So I think that's a really important piece that you mentioned.
I think that value forward approach really does pull at heartstrings. It does create an appeal. And I think you look at so many of the organizations that do really well, they have capitalized on the storytelling piece. I mean, my organization, NAMI, Arapahoe, Douglas counties, we are an arbiter of stories. I mean, we offer education, support, and outreach for those who are struggling with mental health and the loved ones who care about them. And really, from that perspective, I can tell you we have thousands of stories. Like everybody has a story, and to them, it's unique. And when we start looking at them as a collective of, oh, this is the same story just lumped into a category, I think we miss the essence of the reality that everybody's story, while there may be similarities, is different and potentially has something to teach somebody else who's not as far down the path.
Absolutely. And I'm curious. It sounds like what you're talking about is using stories to connect, right?
Right.
And how can people leverage stories to create that emotional connection? Has your work with NAMI helped you understand how to reach communities with storytelling?
It has. And that has really been the foundational work that builds upon the work I do in my organization connection project. What we recognize, so NAMI is an organization, if somebody's listening and doesn't really understand the structure, national organization, state organizations, and then affiliate organizations. So in Colorado, there are 14 affiliates. I lead one of the largest affiliates in the state of Colorado. A lot of NAMI organizations are volunteer led, don't have paid staff, and really are made up of those family members and loved ones who want to support their loved ones who struggle with mental health condition, which is great. What I recognized from doing that work was, NAMI services really focused on the chronically and persistently mentally ill, are those people who will likely always have some sort of need for care or help on a continuum. But it leaves out a broad swath of people that struggle with life transition issues, the people that go through a divorce or lose a job or lose a loved one or a pet, take your pick. We all have seasons in our lives that we may not show up in the way that we want to or wished we had of. And where do you get plugged into support during those times? So from that understanding, I created my organization connection project, and really the goal was simple: to strengthen and deepen connection to ourselves and others, which I think frankly is what we're all looking for. If you look over what's changed in the last decade, all of us coming off a horrific 2.5 years, but the fact of the matter is we're buried in our devices more than we've ever been also. And I think people assume there is an implied connection in technology. And I think you can get that through technology. But at the end of the day, David, there's no replacement for what you and I are doing now, or if we sit down and have a meal together or go have a cup of coffee. And I think people are struggling and seeking that. So when we get to those challenging places in life and are looking for ways to get plugged in or get connected, I don't think that's easy for most people. So Connection Project was really built, again, to strengthen and deepen connection, but it has evolved into really a machine, so to speak, of connecting vulnerable or marginalized communities. Because when we started, where I struggled in the beginning was, how do you take this concept that applies to everybody and really bring it down into a message that everybody can receive? And the answer is you can't. So what we started looking at was, what are the communities that are most vulnerable or the most marginalized? And by that, I'm looking at the communities that had really high suicide rates, depression, anxiety rates, substance use and misuse disorders, the things that we could tangentially understand as a basis point for struggle. And then really from there, creating these social impact campaigns that were really designed and built to connect people through imagery and through messaging that meets their audience, so they perceive they're part of that audience, and really delivering those messages over and over again through the miracle of technology, which we're all tethered to, and getting people connected to resources that could be valuable for them in a time of struggle or need.
So I'm curious, how are you measuring the impact?
So that's a great question. So most of our campaigns are built through digital marketing platforms or through social media platforms. So what we're really empowered with is, we have a ton of data to support everything from demographic data to user preferences data to really understanding from when somebody lands upon our site where they go next. We can put tracking pixels in from our site to the place that we're sending them out to, and we can start really looking at reach. So the empowerment of the work that we're doing is really being able to take a look back and say, 40% of the people were searching for resources like this, and they went to these organizations. So then you start talking to your partners that you're partnered with, the partner organizations, and you say, okay, we're sending this much traffic to your sites. Have you considered, or have you thought about, or what are the results that you can share back with us that may start to shape the conversation? I think that kind of empowerment, frankly, opens the door for us to better meet people where they are. I think prior to being able to do this in the way that we've done it, it's been a shot in the dark of we just assume, oh, people are struggling and they're going to want this, so let's do more of that. I don't think that was ever necessarily validated by data unless somebody walked through your door or called your organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in terms of success with Connection Project, when it comes to digital marketing, what's been maybe one or two of your biggest successes that you've had?
So we launched a campaign. NAMI ADCO was its client during COVID. Our goal was to let people know that there were mental health resources and supports available. So we built a campaign called Everyone Struggles, which happens to be a tagline in Connection Project. And really, it was a video series, it was radio spots, it was digital marketing, it was social media, but there was, a resource list that had been developed for adults and youth that were part of that campaign, but it was targeted to the two counties that we serve here in Colorado, Arapahoe and Douglas counties, which is basically comprised of 1 million people. So statistically, if 1 in 4 struggle with a mental health condition, I mean, that's 250,000 people that are known, not given what we all went through in the past 2.5 years, knowing people have struggled at alarming rates. And we delivered that campaign over the course of 4 months. And again, it's targeted to those 1 million people. We made 4.5 million impressions in the first 3 months. And if you start looking at the click-through rates, one of our community health centers mental health centers that we partner with, in the first 3 months, we had 1,100 outbound clicks to that organization. So, again, you start just imagining conversions, even if 1% of those people became clients, and I could measure that for every single resource that we have on our page. We did a campaign for emergency responders. I do a lot of work in the responder community called Everyday Brave. We hosted a podcast series. We had a digital resource list. We had tailored digital marketing and social ads for the responder community. Again, we had similar type results. That was a Denver Metro campaign. And I'm giving you some Colorado-based ones. I also do this work at a national scale. But, sometimes the impact that we see when we approach it from our community in a regional way is a really good barometer or indicator for how is this going to be received if we roll this out in other markets. And I will say those two campaigns in particular, the click-through rates were so high on them that the organization who runs those campaigns for me wanted to do case studies on them.
That's phenomenal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like click-through rates. I was reading an article, I think it was yesterday, and they were featured by a big ad company that they got 0.31% click-through rate. So CTR, for anybody that wants like the tech term there. What would you say if you were to just ballpark the click-through rate was?
Ours were 2.5 times that.
That's awesome,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like being able
I
to.
I had one campaign that was over 1.
So for anybody listening, like 1%, right, is really good work, right?
Well, but it is phenomenal work, and I'm not going to take all the credit for it. I have a phenomenal team that backs me up. But I think there's a couple of things that go into it. When you go back to what we talked about earlier about the value forward approach, when you put yourself in people's shoes, let's just take the Everyone Struggles campaign, for instance. We collectively were struggling as humans through what we've been through in the last 2.5 years. And people were willing to talk about mental health in a way that they never had before because they were struggling at alarming rates. So we create something. I mean, the campaign was powerful. The very first image was a woman wearing a mask that had this kind of dead look in her eyes. That's where the video started. That's where the social media campaign started. You could see yourself in that one image. So I think when people build campaigns and they're focused on this value forward approach, it has to be built from the place of who is your intended audience and what is the imagery and the messaging that is going to resonate with them. And often, we'll try images that I would never have picked and they will do phenomenal. And the ones that I think will do great don't. And, by and large, like I said, I do a lot of work in the responder community. It is amazing. Firemen images fighting fires do better than any other kind of responder video, responder image that I've put out there. I don't know why, but people are really drawn to them. I don't know.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So, I'm still trying to figure that out. And I don't think there's any magic sauce to it. But I think the willingness to show up and recognize the community that you serve and let them see what you're giving them in your campaigns, I think that's what matters. I think people recognize inauthenticity. And I see a lot of campaigns that are beautifully done, but I don't feel the heart in them. I mean, at the end of the day, I believe my job here is to be the messenger of this message and to serve other people. Do I think I have some gifts that make me unique to doing this? Perhaps, but that's not the point. This isn't about me. If I'm here to serve communities, I have to figure out I'm doing what I can to serve communities.
I think what you're talking about is really kind of circled around being able to niche, right? And or niche if you're in the States. Who is it that you're trying to connect with, right? You can't be out there being like, "Hey, we need money. This is what we're doing." Right? Like you really need to know the audience. And what are your thoughts in terms of the importance of a niche when it comes to connecting with nonprofit communities?
I think the importance of a niche is just first and foremost recognizing that it's everything. For me, this work is built upon some of the most painful experiences in my life. I can literally put myself in the shoes of somebody struggling because I have been there. I would say that I built this life from hell, and I don't mean that dramatically, but the fact of the matter is when I was going through my dark night of the soul, here's what I know. I am a white male that's educated, that had resources, that has a family support and structure. I had all these boxes checked that should have worked in my favor, and I still didn't know where to begin. I didn't know how to get help. And if somebody that had all those boxes checked, like myself, couldn't find out where to get help, that's a problem. So for me, it really highlights the fact that it is just too hard, and if we want to create an invitation space for people to help themselves, we have to help them along. I think that is our responsibility as a system. And I do think that we have failed as a system of recognizing that people need some help sooner than later. And I also think the system assumes when you talk about niches that everybody is willing to go to therapy, figure out if they can find a therapist, if they've got insurance to pay for it, take meds, go to a treatment center if they're really struggling with something in a bad way. I don't think that's where anybody begins their journey. And the system assumes that most people are willing to do all of those things. And I think the fact of the matter is, we have to go back and recognize that most people aren't even willing to admit that they're struggling with something that they need help with. So if we're assuming that everybody's going to be over here and everybody's still really stuck over here, we're missing some steps to connect people between the two. And I think that's where the work and the niche that I've created really fills in. It's a next step. It's helping you see yourself in that imagery, in that messaging, and imagine, okay, well, let me look at the resource list. I mean, our resource lists are simple. They'll have multiple resources, but they're divided out in kind of easily digestible way. I mean, traditionally, you go somewhere for support and they want to give you a resource list or access to it, it's going to be 50 things. If you're struggling, what is the likelihood that you can discern 50 things and make a decision on the next step? It's too hard. So I feel my responsibility is really, how do we make this easier, and how do we better connect with people earlier to help them recognize there is help available, and it doesn't have to be this hard. There is an impetus that's going to require you to take a next step, but I don't think we have to see the whole staircase yet. And I think the traditional system assumes people are willing to go farther, they're willing to go faster than statistics really dictate they are. There's not a single statistic that proves what we're doing is actually working. Depression and anxiety rates aren't down, substance use and misuse disorder rates aren't down, suicide rates aren't down. So if we're approaching fixing what we're going through with the same stuff we've been doing, I hate to say we're probably going to have similar outcomes, but worse because there's more people in the mix.
And I think, a good part of this has to do with stigma. A lot of people end up in situations or are in situations willingly or unwillingly, or just by their life journey or their parents' life journey or their friends, because of stigma, because there isn't somebody there trying to fill the void and go, you know what? Think about doing things like this, or here's how you can get help, or here's, the one thing that you should be thinking of or that you can do, or, the resource list, having like, all right, do these 5 things and you will, be able to deal with or overcome this specific thing,
Right.
right? And breaking it down to small, chunkable, bite-sized bits, I think is really what will help more people than not.
Well, I think it's that. And, stigma is an interesting word to me. Of course, I agree with the societal stigma, but I also think stigma is one of those things that, is often for many of us internalized. If you feel a certain way about something, that stigma lives within you. If you're not affected by it, you're not going to feel stigmatized by it. So I think there's some nuances in how we see stigma that could be advanced and evolved. But the fact of the matter is, society assumes that people are willing to do more than actually seems to prove out. Not everybody is going to take action to get better. Like, and instead of pretending that we're going to drag everybody along there, I think we would be more realistic to recognize what are the things that we can do to meet people where they are, knowing that taking a walk around the block and getting some sun on their head, that may be their idea of helping themselves. And maybe that's enough. We've approached
Absolutely.
this from a perspective of everything needs to be in this nice tiny little package, and people are going to show up and they're going to do the work. Well, first of all, I don't think it's realistic. Secondly, I think the demand for support far exceeds the supply today. So I don't think, even if everybody wanted to show up for support, I don't think there's support to meet them there by and large. And frankly, there are many things that we could be doing from a self-empowerment perspective to support ourselves that I think we have a responsibility to remind people, hey, have you thought about getting some sun on your head? Are you sleeping enough? Are you drinking enough water? Have you written down 3 things you're grateful for? Or have you gotten some exercise? Like, these are really simple things. And you see those messages kind of shared in hospital systems and insurance systems, but unless you're part of that system and digesting the content they're giving you, that's the bigger key, you've forgotten that there is a life outside of your device. And there are things that you can do right now, today, for free, that will likely, in this moment, make a difference. And I'm not saying unilaterally and in every instance, but I have found by and large, if you're willing to show up for yourself and take one next step, you can likely build upon that step to the next step. Where I think we screw ourselves is instead of focusing on the next step, we want to look at the whole staircase. And the reality is, you don't get up the staircase any other way than one step at a time, right?
Yeah, and I think it's important to have the goals and aspirations go, okay, this is where we want to be. You want to be at that top of that staircase, using your analogy, but you need to break that down and go,
Right.
okay, here's what we can do. Here is how we can help people along the way, along their journey, and also understanding not everybody is on the same journey. Not everybody will take the second step, right? Maybe they're going to do like every 2 steps,
Right.
right? And
And
get
that's
there.
okay,
There isn't
David.
a single path, right?
Yeah, that's okay. But I think our traditional system assumes that people are willing to do that in a very linear way. And I don't think that's proven out. So that to me is where I really diverge. And again, I don't mean it as a criticism for anybody that wants to do it a traditional way. I followed that path myself, and it was hugely valuable and important for me. But I can tell you, it was hard. It wasn't short, it wasn't easy, and it required me to show up over and over and over again. And the reason I was able to do it is because my life was too painful that if I didn't, I wouldn't have made it out of this. I don't think everybody falls into that category. And even people that don't want to do it that way, doesn't mean it's the only way.
And I think that's important for everybody listening to this, is to know, what? Not everybody is going to do things the way that you intend, right?
Right.
There's a journey, like you want to go from A to B, but it's more like this, right? And like going around and
Right.
around, and until you end up with somebody at the point that you want them to be at. So like if
Well,
people
I
were to
think
think about,
that's the basis of when you talk about organizations and how they market to people. If you market assuming that everybody's going to do it your way and by your method, I think you've already cut yourself out of a huge audience that won't ever do it that way. So if there's an opportunity for you to adapt and pivot and say, hey, they may not do it this way, but we can meet you right here and do it this way. That to me, I think is the responsibility and obligation of where we are in the world, I think we have to be willing to do things a different way. I think what the pandemic taught us is people are struggling at alarming rates. They're talking about things they're struggling with that they never would have before. And the fact of the matter is that does not imply they have a mental illness. You know, if you have a brain, you have mental health. We all have mental health. And the likelihood of throughout our lives, we may have periods of transition or struggle that we don't show up in the best way. Like, okay, like let's figure out how to meet people there. It doesn't mean we need to dump them into this system that, oh my gosh, you got to do all of this stuff. And I'm not discounting any of that because I've done it. It works. I'm a fan of it, but I don't think it's the path for everybody. It was my path, but I don't think it's everybody's path.
Absolutely. Right. Like anybody listening to this, if you dive into any kind of analytics on your website, right? Like how many people are landing on your homepage? Right? The homepage is important, but it's probably 30 to 40%. Just because you want them to go there doesn't mean they're going to go there. They're going
Right.
to land deep in your site. Same thing with life's journey, right? Not everybody goes to post-secondary education, college,
Right.
university. They go right into the workforce. And, you know, some end up really successful, some don't, some go back to school, some travel, right? It's a non-linear path. And I think that's
And I
something
think that's
to be
always been the
cognizant of.
case.
Absolutely.
You know, I think we just have more focus and attention on the fact that you've got to do it a certain way. I see some really smart, successful people that are saying, hey, maybe college is not the answer for everybody. You know, there are a lot of what I would consider non-traditional paths that people are taking today to earn really fantastic livings. And you don't need a college degree to do it. Like, I don't know. I have one, but I don't know that I don't use the degree that I have. But again, I think it goes back to there is not one path. And our
Absolutely.
system assumes that the path is pretty linear. And I think that's a dangerous perspective.
So keeping that in mind, when we think about digital marketing, and okay, you know, not every path is linear, what are some of those big challenges that you see that exist in digital marketing?
I think first and foremost is it's a really big marketplace. You're fighting for a lot of attention and traffic. You know, again, I'm pretty good at building demo sets and I'm pretty good at targeting where the audiences that I want to build from. But I think you know, in understanding it's a crowded marketplace, I think it also requires what you put in may be correlated to what you get out. And there are a lot of different tools that you can implement. For instance, we know video does better than static images. Short video does even better than long format video, although I can get people to watch 2-minute videos at a fairly compelling rate. But I think it depends on what the messaging is and how interested people are in that. But all of it goes back to what you put in based on how well you understand your customer audience, I think is going to relate to what you get out. And realizing that digital marketing is kind of a long game. If you go into it and assume that you're going to get these phenomenal results in a very short clip, and I have done that many times over, but the things that I want kind of to be the slow burn, you have to realize you're going to have to put some money behind this and be committed to having fresh creative and content that people want over the long haul.
And I think that's really key, right? It's not a one and done.
Right.
It's not a instant gratification. If you're looking for help, so anybody listening to this, if you're looking for help and you go online, you go to Google and you search for digital marketing agency, and if anybody tells you, look, we'll have you ranked in the number one spot within 30 days, or we're going to get you 50,000 views of your video within a month, like realistically, if it sounds too good to be true, it
It
is. You
is.
need to think about this in the long game. It's like SEO. It's like writing a book, right? You can't just sit down and write, you know, your life story, your autobiography in an afternoon, right? It takes months and months, if not years. Some people are doing these type of things for years and years and years. And if you
Well,
put in
yeah.
the time
And
and
a
the
lot of
effort, it
times they
pays
may be
off.
doing the wrong things. For instance, I have a national nonprofit client that I work with, and I do all of their marketing for them. So everything, their brand and their marketing, my team has created it, and we run it on a national level in a really, really big way. And when I stepped into the organization, they were doing a turnover in leadership. And what we learned walking in is they were spending $1.17 for every dollar they raised.
That's a problem.
Yeah. So we pulled back on every single bit of it, and we started a slow drip campaign over the course of the next year with new creative, new imagery, new video. We did a teaser video that fleshes out who the organization is in less than a minute. And I will tell you, by and large, we've had millions of views of that video. I get video views at a penny a piece. Like, that's pretty cheap marketing. But what it took is us pulling this way back and saying, this is not working. We're not going to continue to do this. And let's figure out. And I will tell you, week in and week out, we tweak our audiences based on what the week before told us. And doing that committedly and consistently has brought the cost down to a fraction of what it used to cost to be able to raise money.
And I think that's a really key point, is leveraging your analytics to make key decisions. Doing testing, A/B testing, right? If you're going to send an email out, send it to a small sample, maybe 100 people, right? But do 2. Change one thing, change the call to action in there, change the email subject, change from an HTML email to a plain text email, right, and see what works in between them. But scientifically speaking, A/B testing, right, you should only change one variable at a time. But over time, you're going to figure out, the day of the week that works best, the time of that day that works best,
right,
and the type of messaging, the tone, the style. Like, do you use an emoji? Do you not use an emoji? And you'll see what is going to work and what's going to stand out for you.
But I think that goes back to a crowded marketplace. And I also think that goes back to people's bandwidth to take more on. Think about how many emails most of us get that we don't recall subscribing to. I feel like I'm constantly unsubscribing to things that I don't recall subscribing to or being opted into. And I think that limited bandwidth piece is really important, why you have to be able to capture somebody's attention right out of the box. And I don't admit I do this perfectly always, but I do think, to your point, and I've got a huge A/B test going right now. It's an email series, and really we did it because I wanted to learn more about the preferences of the audience that we're serving more than anything. But by and large, what we changed is the subject line in the video. The copy's the same, but those 2 things and how they look are just slightly different. And it's interesting. So far, I can't really tell. I'm not really clear on what it's going to tell me, but it's having a good success rate. But I think most people go into this assuming that just because they have a good idea or they have a good product and they're going to spend some money on marketing, I think they assume that that's going to convert into something real. And I don't think by and large that's a given.
I think we need to have realistic expectations in terms of, what's going to happen with this. If you've never done video in your organization, you're like, all right, we're going to hit the ground running. We're going to make like 5 videos. We're going to publish them 1 a week. How many views is that first one going to have? Like, realistically,
4,
right?
4.
Right? It takes time. You've got to build up the audience. You have to market it. You have to let people know. You've got to share it. You've got to get brand ambassadors, volunteers that work with your organization, sharing it and commenting, and employees. And it's not we're just going to do this and the world is going to open up to us, right?
Yeah.
But
I think a lot of people assume that.
Right.
They look at these accounts that have all these likes and all of that. For many of these people, that's a 10-year cycle. This didn't start just in a vacuum in a day. Oh, we have this huge following, unless you've done something that makes you go viral. And I think that's what everybody wants this day and age, is to go viral about something. But again, I don't think that's the norm.
It's hard. Like, to your point, right? YouTube. If you're going to publish video, you've got to get it on YouTube, period. End of story, right? YouTube is the second most popular search engine right after Google, right? Alphabet owns both, but you need to leverage it, right? And by putting in the descriptions, putting in the tags and the keywords, linking back to your site, learning all those kind of little nuances does take time. If you're not working with a professional, if you're spending your own time because you don't have budget, that's totally fine. Not everybody does, right?
But it's also a whole other job.
Absolutely. 100%. 100%. Right? But take a look at what's working. And if this specific topic is working, create another video, write another blog article, create some other content around that topic, right? And see how that does. And if that keeps working, keep going down the path that's working, right? And that will help set the tone for a baseline that you can measure other things against.
Absolutely.
Awesome, Jason. Some amazing insights. I hope people listening have been able to get some advice, some insight, some pointers from you and from myself today during our conversation. And I want everybody to just take a moment, take 10 minutes of your month, right? 10 minutes of your month. How much, what percentage is that, right? Like 0.01% of your time, right? Take 10 minutes take a look at your analytics, see if there's any data in there that will help make you have a smarter decision for the next time that you want to do something, whether it's your website, social media accounts, email marketing, any other kind of KPIs that you've got. If you don't have any KPIs, take 10 minutes and create a KPI, right? And then in a Google sheet or a Excel doc, just start keeping track month over month, week over week, whatever the cadence is that you want. And then you'll be able to actually make some decisions over time that are based on empirical data.
Right. Spot on.
So Jason, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what do they need to do?
So I'm super easy to find. If somebody wants to email me, I'm jason@realpeoplereallife.org. Organizations Connection Project is realpeoplereallife.org is the website. And my work at NAMI is namiadco.org. I'm super responsive, and it's easy to find me any of those places.
Awesome. Thanks again so much, Jason. It's been great having you here on the Nonprofit Digital Success Podcast. Everybody listening, if you want any of the links or the contact details that Jason just provided, head over to our podcast page at nonprofitdigitalsuccess.com/podcast. Click on this episode for all the details on our show notes page. And until next time, keep on being successful.